Lost teenage scout Geoffrey Haig went missing in the Great Smoky Mountains in 1970. Who placed his belongings on a rock in the middle of an ice-cold stream? Geoffrey Haig goes missing. On February 8, 1970, a 16-year-old scout went missing in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The boy's name was Geoffrey Haig, and he was found deceased after a search that lasted almost a week and a half. DP covers this case in the Missing 411 book Eastern United States. Geoffrey Haig's disappearance was a high-profile case. He went missing in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park less than 8 months after Dennis Martin disappeared, and Dennis' father, William Martin, participated in the Haig search. The lost Geoffrey Haig went down the Walker Prong drainage. A scout group, led by Scoutmaster Eugene Smith, hiked the Appalachian Trail on their way to the Newfound Gap parking lot by the US 441 highway. When they reached the Appalachian Trail Boulevard Trail Junction, Geoffrey Haig told his companions to go on without him as he needed to take a rest. The rest of the scouts waited for him at the parking lot, but he never arrived. The weather took a turn for the worse and snow began to fall. Temperatures were sub-freezing. A search ensued that included hundreds of searchers, including the Green Berets. K-9 units from Sevier County, Cherokee, Philadelphia, Fort Bragg, and Seattle. It was determined that Geoffrey Haig had taken the Boulevard Trail and then walked downhill, following the Walker Prong stream. During the search, SAR teams discovered Geoffrey Haig's belongings neatly placed on a rock in the middle of the Walker Prong stream. His lifeless body was found approximately 2/5 of a mile from that location shortly after. DP's quotes below are all from the Missing 411 book Eastern United States. #1 DP claims that the Scoutmaster was puzzled that Geoffrey Haig lagged behind the group. It was almost this time that the group realized that Geoffrey was lagging behind, not sure why, but he was traveling slowly. The Scoutmaster and the scouts were puzzled at Geoffrey's disappearance because the trails and signs clearly showed the direction he was supposed to travel. Was the Scoutmaster puzzled that Geoffrey Haig left the group? No, the Scoutmaster was not puzzled that Geoffrey Haig left the group. The Tennessean states. Eugene Smith, Scoutmaster, feels the youth intentionally parted from the group to take the Boulevard Trail. He said Haig and 2 other scouts got into a snowball fight the night before, that Haig apparently got the worst of the scrap and was disturbed after the 3 boys were reprimanded by Smith. An article published in the Tennessean on February 20, 1970. The snowball fight and Geoffrey Haig being upset are not mentioned in Eastern United States. Instead, his departure is treated as a mystery. Keith Nielsen, administrator of the park, commented on Haig's decision to leave the group in an article published in the Johnson City Press. The boy obviously intended to separate from the rest of his party from the moment he stopped at the trail junction to rest, says Keith Nielsen, administrator of the park. There seems no question about that. An article published in the Johnson City Press on February 18, 1970. DP claims that Geoffrey Haig had no reason to leave the trail. When Geoffrey disappeared, the trails were very clearly marked. There could be no mistake about this. There would be no reason for Geoffrey to voluntarily leave a trail and travel 1,000 yards down into a drainage. None. Did Geoffrey Haig have a reason to leave the trail? DP, who cannot read other people's minds, here fails to eliminate his personal bias. SAR concluded, based on the evidence they gathered, that Geoffrey Haig left the Boulevard Trail in an attempt to reach the US 441 highway. Haig then changed his mind in the rugged terrain and attempted to regain the Boulevard Trail, but he did not make it. The US 441 highway is visible from the Boulevard Trail, according to 1970 sources. Geoffrey Haig's scout group hiked, as previously mentioned, to the Newfound Gap parking lot. This parking lot is located next to the US 441 highway. The US 441 highway is visible from the Boulevard Trail. The other scouts hiked to the Newfound Gap parking lot. Early in the search dogs followed a scent trail to the US 441 highway, but the scent was lost there. The Victoria Advocate states. Earlier, park officials had expressed the belief that young Haig might have made his way to US 441 and been picked up by a passing motorist. This theory was supported by the fact that dogs followed a scent along Walker Prong Tuesday to the highway and then lost trail. The Kingsport Times states, evidence gained from the 11 days of searching for the boy indicates that he walked along Boulevard Trail, toward Mt. LeConte, at least 4 miles. Then returned to a point about 1¼ miles from Boulevard's junction with the Appalachian Trail before plunging into the cruel drainage wilderness in a cross-country effort to get out of the area. DP goes against expert opinions. You may hear some SR people state that Geoffrey just froze to death. I don't think so. It's much more complicated. Did Geoffrey Haig die from exposure in sub-freezing temperatures? Yes, Geoffrey Haig died from exposure the day he went missing or the day after he went missing. We either trust SAR experts who participated in the 1970 search and the evidence they gathered. The Sevier County coroner, Arnold Atchley, who examined Geoffrey Haig's body. The Sevier County medical examiner, John Hickey, who examined Geoffrey Haig's body. Or a content creator who has not managed to explain a single missing persons case in 12+ years. Did not examine Geoffrey Haig's body. Has no expertise or background in any medical field. The Danville Register, NB states. Atchley said there were several minor scars on and bruises on the youth's arms and hands. He said Haig apparently had tried to climb a steep incline and tumbled about 20 feet, landing against a small tree. DP claims that Geoffrey Haig should have walked to his sleeping bag. Geoffrey didn't have broken bones, and he could walk. His pack, sleeping bag, and supplies were not that far away. Why didn't Geoffrey Haig walk to his sleeping bag? The sleeping bag was not Geoffrey Haig's #1 priority. Haig followed the Walker Prong stream downhill and set up a makeshift camp about half a mile from the trail. He then decided to leave his camp and belongings behind in an attempt to get back to the Boulevard Trail. Unfortunately, Haig did not make it, and he died approximately 1,000 yards from the Boulevard Trail. The Tennessean states. After traveling half a mile, Haig apparently set up a small camp. While doing so, he unexplainably neatly stacked some of his most vital belongings on a rock in the middle of the Walker Prong stream. Later he backtracked 2/5 of a mile toward the Boulevard Trail and met his death. Haig's crumpled body was found resting against the base of a tree after he had tumbled off a 20-foot ledge. Contemporary articles describe how Haig walked around in circles trying to find his way out of the mountains. The Courier Post states, searchers said footprints found yesterday indicated the young scout, son of Mr. and Mrs. William Haig of Morristown, Tennessee, had wandered around a bit. At one place they found evidence that Haig had stumbled to his knees. Apparently, search leaders said Haig walked in circles trying to find his way out of the mountains. DP implies that Geoffrey Haig was not free to get to his belongings. Only after many hours in this very uncomfortable condition things start to change and go numb. This process doesn't happen quickly. Geoffrey suffered for quite some time until his body started to shut down. He had to have gone through extreme anxiety knowing that the comfort of his sleeping bag was just up the creek. There is no logic to explain why Geoffrey didn't get his pack if he was free to do so. Was Geoffrey Haig free to get to his belongings? Yes, no one prevented Geoffrey Haig from getting to his belongings. Not even the imaginary missing 411 abductor. DP says that the process of a body shutting down takes many hours and that conditions have to be uncomfortable. But this applies to Haig, who was lost for many hours in sub-freezing temperatures and heavy snowfall. DP seems to think that Haig's belongings were some form of oasis, but Haig voluntarily left them behind to find the Boulevard Trail and he died in the process. DP's inability to come up with a logical explanation does not mean there isn't one. DP claims that Geoffrey Haig entered a freezing river. There is no logical reason for him to enter a freezing river during heavy snow. None. Did Geoffrey Haig enter a freezing river? No, there is no evidence that this is the case, and no contemporary sources make this claim. DP once again plays his no logical reason card. Geoffrey Haig's belongings were found on a rock in a stream, but the stream was narrow and shallow. The Johnson City Press states, Monday, 8 days after he vanished, his pack, camping equipment, food and extra clothing, exposed to view as the heavy snow in the area melted, were found neatly piled on a rock in the upper reaches of the rugged Walker Prong drainage area. The stream at that point was narrow and shallow. Searchers, led into the drainage area by Army dogs from Ft. Gordon, believed that some 16 inches of snow that fell after the was lost had prevented the equipment's being found earlier. The Leaf Chronicle also mentions the small stream. And so does the Kansas City Times. DP insinuates that someone searched through Geoffrey Haig's pack. Articles inside the pack were lying on the rock or the pack as though someone was taking inventory. Did someone else search Geoffrey Haig's pack and take inventory? No, Geoffrey Haig was the one who placed his belongings on the rock. No sources make the claim someone was taking inventory. DP claims that it is odd that the Green Beret team did not find Geoffrey Haig. It seems very odd that a Green Beret team enters the search for Geoffrey and, as in the case of Martin, are unable to find the boy. Why didn't the Green Berets find Geoffrey Haig? The Green Berets did find Geoffrey Haig. An article published in Kingsport Times states, on Wednesday, a crew made up of Green Berets plus 2 men and a woman from Seattle, Washington, with their avalanche-trained dogs, discovered Haig's body. DP claims that Army K-9 units were unable to find Geoffrey Haig. The Army K-9 units didn't even believe Geoffrey was in the park and believed he exited via a highway. Why didn't Army K-9 units find Geoffrey Haig? An article in the Kingsport Times states that Haig's belongings were in fact found by an Army K-9 unit. The items were found by A.U.S. Army team led by 2 Labrador retrievers. The find consisted of a knapsack, a sleeping bag, cooking equipment, a sweater, a glove, 2 pairs of socks, trousers, a toothbrush, a can opener, 2 belts and a can of ravioli, the only food Haig had with him. Dogs not picking up a scent is a so-called missing 411 profile point, but in the Geoffrey Haig case K-9 units were able to find Geoffrey Haig's belongings. Locations where he rested. Geoffrey Haig's body. Dogs managed to pick up a scent, so why does this case qualify as a missing 411 case? It is noteworthy that DP does not mention the fact that K-9 units managed to find the things listed above. Instead, he portrays the K-9 units as unsuccessful in their attempts to locate Geoffrey Haig because one of the scent trails ended at US 441 highway. DP claims that the person that placed Geoffrey Haig's belongings on the rock will never be identified. Geoffrey was found next to a creek, deceased. His backpack is found in the middle of a creek that no reasonable man would ever enter during a winter storm, yet a creek someone entered and placed Geoffrey's belongings on a rock. The person that set Geoffrey's pack on the rock will never be identified because there are no tracks that can be recovered in a creek bed. Will the person who placed Geoffrey Haig's belongings on the rock ever be identified? The person who placed Geoffrey Haig's belongings on the rock has already been identified. It was Geoffrey Haig. No one who participated in the search in 1970 thinks otherwise. The creek was narrow and shallow, so Haig placing his belongings on a rock was not an insurmountable feat. DP also claims that tracks cannot be recovered due to creek beds, but this claim is not supported by any evidence. Tracks were found in the area and they all belonged to Geoffrey Haig. #11 DP ponders why some missing persons are found in or near creek beds. Missing people are repeatedly found in or near creek beds. Think about the reasons why this may be occurring. Why are some people found near or in creek beds? We can let DP answer this question. Earlier in the book Eastern United States, DP wrote about a 9-year-old boy, Lloyd Neal Hockett, who went missing in the Kiamichi Mountains in 1945. The boy, whose nickname was Sonny, was found dying with tears in his eyes. Hockett was discovered by 2 soldiers, but he unfortunately died on the way to the hospital. DP writes the following. Sonny was on a creek when he was last seen. Someone with a 9-year-old intellect knows not to walk far from that creek because that creek is his salvation. To leave the safety of the creek and climb up a mountain to a ridgeline makes no sense. So, according to DP, creeks represent safety and salvation. Geoffrey Haig believed that the Walker Prong stream would lead him to safety. Some missing persons are found near creeks, streams, or rivers. Did anyone spot the obvious contradiction here? Geoffrey Haig was on a ridgeline, but left it to follow a stream, and DP claims it is odd. Lloyd Neal Hockett followed a stream, but left it for a ridgeline, and DP claims it is odd. In conclusion, I think we will never truly happen to Haig. I personally believe there was no foul play, as it doesn't make sense. But why were his items found in the middle of the creek? We will never know, but more importantly, may he rest in peace.